Hello, my name is Alejandra Yema, and today I'll be presenting on life after prison, incarcerated individuals integrating back into society. This presentation is for Soch 320 at Cal State San Marcos. I chose this topic because labeling plays a major role in shaping people's lives, especially those who have been involved in the criminal system or prison system. Labels don't just describe people, but they change how society treats them and how they see themselves. And when we connect labeling to systems like mass incarceration, we start to see how deep the effects are. So today I'll walk through the theory, the variables I'm studying, and why this issue matters on both a personal and structural level. The theory I chose for my paper was the labeling theory. Labeling theory was developed mainly by Howard Becker and Edwin Lemert, but it also builds on earlier ideas by Charles Cooley. Cooley created the concept of the looking glass self. This idea says that we understand who we are by imagining how other people see us. Um, and we look at their reactions, their comments, and their judgments, and we internalize those things. So basically, who we are as a person and how we act is not because of ourselves, but mostly because of how society reacts towards our actions, therefore leading us to want society to have the best reactions to our actions. So yeah, basically just identity is shaped socially. It doesn't come within us. Howard Becker took this idea and applied it to deviance. In his book Outsiders, he argued that deviance isn't about what people do, but about how others respond to them. In other words, no act is inherently deviant. It only becomes deviant because society labels it that way. Deviance isn't something that is natural or there's a certain deviance that exists. It's more like we as a society make the rules of what is deviant and what isn't deviant, therefore giving people different outcomes. There's certain deviances where it just depends on the person and if they would see it as a deviant thing. And that's because we're all our own individual person. Um, Someone isn't a criminal because of what they did, but they become a criminal because society reacts to them as if they're a criminal. Edwin Lemert added another layer to this by introducing primary and secondary deviance. Primary deviance is the initial act, like someone breaking a law or committing a small offense, but secondary deviance is much more significant since it's when the individual accepts and internalizes the deviant label. So the first part is just that someone is breaking the law or doing something deviant, and the second part is society reacting to that deviance, and therefore that person that has broken that law or done that deviance reacting to society's reaction, and therefore internalizing that I'm a criminal and this is how I will now be. Because if someone is constantly called a criminal, treated like one, and stigmatized, they may eventually start to see themselves as one and act according to that label. So, overall, labeling theory tells us that labels shape identity and behavior, and that society plays a huge role in reinforcing deviance instead of reducing it. This theory helps explain why many formerly incarcerated individuals struggle to reintegrate. They're carrying a label that society refuses to let them shed. For my variables, um, I want to introduce my variables in my research. So I have my independent variable, which is incarceration. This includes the experience of being imprisoned, the conditions inside prisons, and the policies that shape how people are treated while incarcerated. My dependent variables are recidivism. post-prison outcomes, and latinx experiences. Recidivism refers to people returning to prison after being released. It's a major issue in the United States where the system is often set in ways that encourage people to come back rather than stay out. Post-prison outcomes include things like employment, housing, stability, public assistance, and access to resources. Many formerly incarcerated people face huge barriers in these areas because of their criminal label. It affects whether they can find work, qualify for housing, or access basic support. The last dependent variable is Latinx experiences. This is especially important because Latinx individuals often face additional labeling tied to immigration status, citizenship, and stereotypes about criminality. The criminal justice system affects Latinx communities in unique ways, and labeling interacts with racialization and immigration in ways that need more attention. These variables are important because they help us understand not only the individual consequences of labels, but also how labels are tied to larger systems like prisons, law enforcement, and immigration policy. This is my discussion here of my research, and why it matters and how it connects to real world issues. First, incarceration is in the United States, it's huge and massive compared to other countries. The world watches the US struggle with mass incarceration, and yet not a lot has been done to reduce it. The prison system benefits economically from keeping people inside, especially through prison labor. People who are incarcerated are usually required to work, and refusing to work means losing privileges like visitation or commissary. Most of the people that are in prison, if they are able-bodied, they have to work so they don't lose these privileges, which isn't right, mostly if they're already in there for the crime that they committed, but it's also a place where you're supposed to be rehabilitated so you can go back into society. But in the US, most of the prisons aren't used for rehabilitation. They're used more for the capitalization of it. Most prisons are just a big roll into how the US is running in capitalization and in the economy. In California alone, there's like over 70 prison factories spread across 33 prisons. This again creates an economic incentive to keep prisons full, so the people that are in prison can continue working for very low wages or no wages at all, and just keep the economy running in the world, or at least in the US. This connects directly to recidivism because the prisons want the people that just went out to come back in so they can continue working in the factories and they can continue doing and running in the system. So when people come out of prison, they're often set up to fail because of the label that follows them. They face stigma when looking for work, bias from employers, and barriers to getting housing. They can be denied public assistance or have to go through long, complicated processes to access it. So the system doesn't support reintegration, it actually pushes them back towards prison and back into the system, again, leading to recidivism and leading them back to where they want. Post-prison life is extremely difficult for many formerly incarcerated individuals. Studies show that even 8 to 10 months after release, many people, especially women, still rely on public assistance because they can't secure stable employment. And even when they want to work, employers may reject them simply because of their criminal record. The label of criminal becomes a permanent identity that prevents them from rebuilding their lives, just in general and at all. For Latinx communities, the situation can be even more complicated, like changing immigration laws and policies has made citizenship less secure for some people. An example of this is the case of Mario Rene Lopez, who became a naturalized citizen through his mother when he was a minor, and even though he legally should be considered a citizen based on citizenship laws that have been changed, he still faced the threat of deportation after being incarcerated. This just conveys how powerful labels can be, and not just in terms of criminality, but also in terms of how people are racialized and targeted by immigration systems. Like overall, the immigration, it's changing drastically every day due to the presidency and their way of thinking, to the point where no one is really safe from any from anything, honestly. Um, Honestly, this just shows why labeling matters and how labels follow people long after they leave prison, and they influence how society treats them, how institutions respond to them, and whether they have the chance to rebuild their lives. Labeling theory helps us understand that why the system continues to reproduce inequality and how deeply these labels affect people's lives. These are the main sources that I used, including research on labeling theory, prison labor, post-prison experiences, Latinx citizenship cases, and incarceration data. Um, it just helped me understand how labeling connects to mass incarceration and why this issue is so important. That's pretty much it. Thank you.